Good evening, CA World. I would love to stand before you all today and tell you about how I'm transforming my upper lip into a handsome tribute to Tom Selleck. But I'm here to tell you about an entirely different type of transformation. See, earlier this year, I had the brilliant idea to convince several of our team members that we should grow our mustaches and buy police officer uniforms and stage a Super Troopers or Reno 911 photo shoot at the end of this month. So being the awesome folks that they all happily agreed. Sometime after that, I was approached about coming here to tell our transformation story at CA World. And I didn't take long to realize that this opportunity fell right in the same month in which we'd be growing our mustaches. So I contacted the team immediately and I said, guys, there's no way I can do this. I have to back out of Movember. I can't stand up on that stage and look like a fool in front of all those people. But since I spend a large portion of my days talking about how agile teams make and hold their commitments to each other, the team correctly informed me, there's no way you're backing out of this. You have to do it. They were right. I agreed. We learned really early on in our transformation that we have to be willing to commit to our teams, to be willing to look foolish, to be vulnerable, and to be brave. As challenging as this may be to our own personal egos, it's absolutely critical to effect the types of large-scale changes necessary for true transformation. For those of you who are familiar with Simon Sinek, you know how he's identified that all great teams and all great initiatives start with a clear, shared vision of why. For GE, a company that's continually evolved and transformed itself over the last 125 years, a new why recently emerged. See, GE looked out across the industry and saw all these many new entrepreneurial, software-based companies of the world and recognized that by learning from them that we could create a lot of new substantial value for the world. We also recognized the rapid pace of disruption that was happening across many industries and saw the long-lasting effects that had on many of the incumbent industries. So, seeing that and understanding the many opportunities that could be created by joining our industrial assets together with these new software-fueled connected capabilities, that we had to create the next evolution of company. We had to create this digital industrial company, and we realized that we had to be first. So we had decided to become digital. Now, becoming digital sounds cool, but what does it really mean? And if you're like me, you're envisioning Neo popping the red pill and plugging his brain right into the Matrix. But becoming digital has meant different things at different times. In the 1980s, it was the conversion of analog information into its digital equivalent. So cassette tapes, 8 tracks, VHS tapes, making way for CDs and DVDs, later MP3s. In the 1990s, with the advent of the computer and internet spreading throughout the world, we saw a lot of disruption to existing business models, where online shopping started to take the place of traditional brick and mortars. We saw new sharing economies starting to evolve and take the place with Uber and Lyft and Airbnb. But more recently, with the digital transformation that's been talked about a lot here at the conference, this digital disruption is starting to happen to people in the way that we work together. And we're starting to see a period of connected everything, with cheap and ubiquitous sensors, virtually unlimited computing and storage power, artificial intelligence that's letting us see things that were previously unseeable. And there's emerging new technologies like blockchain, digital cryptocurrencies, robotics in our everyday life, and autonomous vehicles. We can do things today that decades ago, or even a few years ago, we would have perceived as impossible. So being able to understand and adapt in this new technological revolution is about much more than understanding the bits and bytes. It's about understanding people and how they interact with technology and how they interact with each other. So becoming digital requires you to rethink everything. The most challenging part of a digital transformation is recognizing that people will have to change their long-established views, behaviors, and interactions. And in the industrial era, work was based on understandable concepts of assembly lines and supply and demand production economics. And production operations could be procedurally scripted through concepts of operations. Often the work was very complicated, but it wasn't very complex. In the digital era, the existing mental models and methods that we have no longer work. Our systems have become so complex with so many intertangled dependencies that it's exceeded the capacity for any single human brain to understand. We've shifted from that world where individual human efforts were enough. We have to join forces together and collaborate so that collectively we can understand this complex new world around us. We often remind ourselves in our teams that what got us here won't get us there. And for true transformation to occur, it has to go far beyond the confines of traditional IT and engineering. These changes affect everything. So our teams form the Digital Solutions Division of GE Transportation. And a lot of people would look at this picture behind me and see a bunch of big, rusty, big iron assets and kind of wonder, what does this have to do with becoming digital? A couple of decades ago, that would have been a valid question. But today, nearly every one of these assets is informed by, controlled by, or connected to electronic software, systems, and sensors. But we develop for industrial customers who have a lot different expectations. Industrial customers expect very high reliability and availability. These systems transport the world, but they also drive the economy. We're controlling critical assets with complex human factors involvement. We're developing robust systems with expected useful life of 10, 20, even 30 years. And the systems are necessarily complex. As a result, we and our customers have been very risk averse. But the workforce is shifting, and the expectations are changing. We're in a bit of a technological renaissance right now, where we've leapfrogged and made decades worth of technological progress in a few short years. And we're starting to realize, we and our customers, that the changes are more easily accepted on a smaller incremental basis. Our teams are roughly about 1,000 engineers distributed across 6 continents, building a whole portfolio of connected assets in an existing installed base. But we range a whole span of technology over multiple generations. We do embedded microprocessors with real-time safety-critical embedded operating systems, up to legacy mainframe systems that are still running on supported COBOL code. We develop enterprise application software that runs on some of the latest technology stacks with the cutting-edge UIs. We deploy on-prem, we deploy in SaaS cloud-hosted environments. We're doing model-based systems engineering. We're deploying with microservices and containerized applications. We're implementing machine vision, machine learning, convolutional neural networks, and deep learning. So our teams and our products are very broad and very deep. And being able to transform this organization with such a deep domain expertise and a rich history is a really, really complex challenge. And I'm sure many of you feel the same way with your businesses. But rapid disruption is affecting every aspect of how we work. And it's challenging every preconceived notion that we have of how to manage work. But we can all learn how to adapt, and we can find a way to succeed within our own environments. I've always wanted to learn how to surf. There's just something really cool about being out on the ocean and being one with the waves that always struck me as something I wanted to do. So now that I live in Florida, I decided I should stop talking about it and actually go do it. So the first couple of times I went out with friends, and they taught me how to get out past the surf, how to get up on my board, and they helped push me along and get me started. And being out there with friends to coach and guide me made it seem really easy. And I started thinking, I can do this on my own. This is simple. So I went out and I bought a surfboard. The next weekend, I went out by myself. It became really clear to me early on that I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. And wave after wave, the ocean just punished me. I must have swallowed about a gallon of seawater. And after paddling furiously and getting nowhere, I started to get really frustrated. I thought that I was doing everything that I'd seen my friends do so easily the week before, but I just couldn't do it. So after struggling for about an eternity, I feel, I decided to head back into shore, drop my board on the beach, and I literally passed out from exhaustion. When I awoke from my sandy power nap, I had a revelation. I realized that our engineering teams had been scrumming, and they'd been trying to do agile, but within the context of a business environment that wasn't actively trying to be agile. And I imagine that they felt much the same way that I did while I was out there getting pummeled by those waves. And in our business environment, and in my own personal weak surfing game, I realized that we needed to learn some techniques to be able to do this better. So, like all millennials, I went home and I got on the internet, and I started researching how to paddle out when surfing. What I found were a couple of tips that have helped me to learn how to surf better, but they've also become a metaphor for our teams of how to manage a transformation within a complex business environment. And those tips were to find the channels, time the sets, be resilient, and paddle with purpose. Now, I'll talk about each one of those 4 things as I go through here, but my hope is that you'll recognize some of these same challenges within your own transformations, and that you'll be able to learn some of the things that work for us and hopefully apply them within your own environments. So as waves travel into shore, they bring a lot of water in with them, and it has to make its way back out to sea. So water always finds the path of least resistance. So along the beach, there's certain sections where the water is literally channeled back out to the ocean. In these spots, it's a little bit deeper, the waves aren't breaking, and so there's less resistance coming at you. So as a surfer, that's where you want to head out. What does this have to do with the transformation? It means that you're always going to encounter resistance, but there's going to be pockets of willingness. And you need to learn how to identify those channels and paddle out around the break. One of the first questions we get from a lot of teams that are starting out and trying to do these types of transformations is, how did you get your executives to buy in and sponsor this? And my answer is it wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight. And we had to try many different things, and there was a couple things that worked for us. Firstly, it was persistence, persistence, persistence. And the second was something that I like to describe as being stupidly optimistic. So I honestly believe those 2 things, they go together. And if you employ yourself with as much passion and enthusiasm that you can muster, those people you're trying to reach will eventually give you the opportunity that you need to reach them. One of the first steps of the Scaled Agile Framework's implementation roadmap is to educate the leaders in a 2-day-long class. For us, in our environment, it became nearly impossible to ever get calendars to align in such a way that we could make that happen. But through persistence, we finally got them to sign up and do this. And at the end of the second day, one of the executives stood up in front of everybody and said, "You know what? You guys have been after me for the last 6 to 8 months to attend this class. And I've thrown nearly every excuse that I know at you to avoid taking the time to do this. And here we are at the end of this second day, and I only have one complaint. That this class isn't 3 days long so we can dig deeper into these topics." I almost fell over. So that same executive went into a staff meeting the following week and sang the praises of the Scaled Agile Framework to his staff. He told them that not only was it important, but it was now imperative to our survival. And he told everyone on his staff that their job was to go out and get educated and trained on SAFe in their role, and he was putting it into their annual objectives for the year. Later that same week, one of our product managers, who had missed the class the week before because he was out at a customer site, flagged me down in the hallway and literally ran to come meet me. And he said, "Mike, I don't know what happened in that classroom last week, but it's like there's some new secret club that I'm not a part of." He said, "There's a palpable level of new energy in the building, and people are standing in the hallways using terms and speaking this new language that I don't yet understand. I'm sorry I missed your class last week, but I really want to be a part of this. How do I get into your next class?" we'd reached that tipping point. And I wish that I could say that it's been smooth sailing since then, but there's always bumps in the road, or chop in the ocean. But when we encounter resistance to transformation, it's usually because people are comfortable with the way that we've always done things, or they have this healthy general fear of the unknown. So every time we do a training or we do a coaching engagement with a team, people come in with their shields up. They're on high alert. And they believe it's their obligation to shoot holes in what you're talking about and prove that you don't know what you're talking about. Because they have this preconceived notion that you've already figured out their roles and responsibilities, and you're just here to tell them what they're going to do in this new digital and agile world. We found it's really easy to kind of diffuse that situation if you're willing to be vulnerable and stand up in front of your peers and say, you're right, I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't have all the answers, but that's okay. Because you and I, we're going to figure this out together. And I actually need your help to do this. If you admit to people that you don't have all the answers and you're willing to be brave and vulnerable in front of them, it deflates the situation and it catches them off guard. Because you can now tell them, agile and lean, it's all about planning, doing, checking, and adjusting. And we are going to apply this to everything that we do from here on out. So setting that context is really important. But what's more important is building a rapport with each one of those people and empathizing with the fact that they have concerns and needs. But if you want to connect with them and tell them, I can actually help you address some of the biggest issues that you have if you're willing to meet me halfway, they go from being those resistors to actually becoming advocates of the change. You need each one of those people to really articulate their what's in it for me. What are the things that would actually make them want to change? So for finance people, we found we can show them that there's going to be this new transparency and they can connect the costs to actual outcomes. And we've been able to meet with our commercial and sales teams and show them that we can improve teams' throughput. And we can actually improve customer collaboration through these continual feedback sessions. And we can connect with our traditional project managers and show them that our teams are actually getting more predictable and that we're actually hitting our on-time deliveries to customers' commitments better. You need to find those channels for everybody. And sometimes it's just as simple as finding someone who says, you know what, I'm not sure about all this yet, but I'm willing to give it a shot. And when you find those people, make them your best friends and then communicate 100 times, 1,000 times over using any channels or communication media that you have available. In surfing lingo, a swell is a set of waves created by wind that travels across the ocean. For example, the winds that blow off the shore in New Zealand actually generate the waves that hit the coast of California. It can be tempting when starting a transformation to want to change everything all at once in this big bang sort of approach. And honestly, that was the way that we started. And so we wrote a statement of work and we put it out for some coaching help. And that statement of work requested our transformation to be done within 6 months. We had no idea what we were hoping to achieve. And going back and reading those plans now, it's quite honestly cringeworthy. And we've learned a lot since then. And the good news is that we actually got started. We didn't wait till we had all the information or all the answers. We knew that we were going to learn along the way, and we were willing to take that risk. And the other bit of good news is that we got some really good coaches with a lot of experience to help us along the way. And some of them are in this room here today. They helped us do an assessment of our teams and understand what levels of agility did we really have and where. And they helped us to build out our plan of attack, which we actually built as a program backlog with features, and we actually worked in the way in which we were trying to teach the people how to work. And we saw that across the organization, there was changes that needed to be made. But there were also changes that were isolated to individual portfolios or teams. So we realized that we didn't have to tackle everything at once. There were places where we could start and places that we needed to hold back. And just talking with the teams, we understand that some teams were ready to go. Others gave us that wait signal and said, we're not ready. But we told them, well, when you are, we'll be there to support you. In the meantime, we're going to go work with others. So some teams just raced out of the gates, but they encountered some stumbling blocks along the way. Other teams that did hesitate have since accelerated substantially. And you have to understand and accept that what you're doing here is fundamentally a cultural transformation. And you will change in some ways the fabric of your business. And you also need to understand that some people won't be willing or able to cross this chasm. Most people will actually need to unlearn old habits and behaviors. That some of the things that were strengths of the past that got us to where we are now actually things that hold us back from the transformation that we're trying to make. So some people will be ready for different aspects of agility, and you need to be willing to be flexible on those things. But it's important to learn that a transformation will test your limits of your abilities to manage change. And you'll need to rapidly learn new techniques. And you also need to understand that people are infinitely variable, but they will never cease to surprise you. One of the best tools that we learned along our journey was reading the book Switch by Chip and Dan Heath. And this book resonated with a lot of us because it talked about the reasons why a certain engagement was failing to take hold, or why something wasn't capturing the imagination of the people. But more than that, it gave us some really practical tips on how to actually manage through those. So one of the best pieces of advice from that book was to actively find the bright spots. When you're taking on a transformation, it's really easy to focus on the problems and all the things that are broken that need to be fixed. But if you're focused on the problems, you're often overlooking the good stuff. So you need to work on finding the things that are working and figure out how to double down on those things and replicate that level of success. So highlight that Scrum Master who's making their team ceremonies fun and exciting. Celebrate the team that retired some antiquated tool from their build process in their never-ending quest to get faster. Or send a personal handwritten thank you note to a product manager that's willing to take their lunch breaks to run training video classes with their colleagues to learn about SAFe. Now, each one of these things may sound trivial and really insignificant, but you can't underestimate the importance to that person that took the time and initiative to do those things. And you can never underestimate the power of just those simple, kind gestures, because they always pay a tenfold dividend later. Timing the sets is important, because you need to learn when to retreat and when to advance. And when you're given that opportunity to advance, you need to go forward with everything you have. And when you succeed, you need to celebrate those bright spots, because you want to hold on to them when some days aren't so sunny. So wipeouts are an unavoidable part of surfing. No one learns how to surf without first taking a few spills. And going out and trying to take on the ocean by yourself is a really risky endeavor. So it's always a good idea to go out with friends, so you always have someone who's got your back. Surfers support each other, especially when the conditions are most challenging. And just like surfers, people who believe in agile transformation are these weird, like-minded individuals that really like helping people to discover their own personal aha moments. So from the outset, we assembled a transformation team, and we built a diverse team that represented all of our portfolios and had members from each one of our geographical locations. And it helped us to build some trust early on and develop empathy with one another, and helped us to ensure that our transformation was meaningful to everyone. And when times get tough, or when cost pressures or schedules come down on people, it's a natural human tendency to fall back on those default methods of operation and using your things that have always gotten you through and what you're comfortable and familiar with. So when we tried to extend from the release trains up into the portfolio management, we hit that resistance. And for us, it felt like we were starting all over again. And you need a team like that you can lean on and talk through some of those challenges and say, why isn't this working? What can we do? How do we reach that person? Because you will fall down. You will get frustrated. And you need that teammate that's going to reach down and pick you back up, dust you off, and tell you it's going to be okay. But you won't always agree with these teammates. Just like any good team or any good family, you're going to have disagreements about how to go about things or where to go next. But we've tried to implement the Jeff Bezos principle from Amazon of disagree and commit. Because recognizing that you all have different viewpoints, and what you may not agree with on the right approach, somebody else's viewpoint, it might not be the same as yours, but it may be valid. And oftentimes you find in the long run it's actually better. But either way, we've been willing to learn and grow together, and that's been helpful. And we've been really fortunate to keep the same team together through most of our transformation. So we've been able to learn from one another, we've been able to lean on each other, and we've been able to keep this consistency of purpose across our entire transformation. And the key to building a great transformation team is finding passionate people with servant hearts. Because passionate people will always find a way to influence others. And lean and agile are not just about teaching people new ways to work. It's about teaching them new ways to lead and new ways to interact with other people. And you need people on your team that'll lead, not because they must, but because they love teaching and serving others. And they also need to have high emotional intelligence because change is hard. And they have to be empathetic, and they have to be willing to treat everyone as individuals. And there's no room for ego on a transformation team. Humility is incredibly important. On our team, we recognize that we are not remarkable, but the results that we're achieving are. So when it's time to head out past the waves, you have to paddle like your life depends on it. I was amazed the first time I went surfing how much I had underestimated the effort involved in doing this. And if you don't paddle hard enough, you'll never get that opportunity to catch that perfect wave. But when you do figure it out and you paddle out and you get to that lineup, you have a chance to kind of sit up, look around for a few minutes and see how the waves are breaking around you. And you can identify when is the right time to catch that wave and start paddling. So when we started launching our first Agile release trains, after our leaders were educated and we trained everyone and we assembled the teams, we had to set a launch date. And when we set that launch date, we had to let nothing get in our way. So as we're preparing, getting a couple weeks out, the team started wanting to push back. Like, we need some more time to groom our feature backlogs. We have to break these down. So we took a pretty strong stance. We said, we're going to hold the date. But we also told the teams that if we make some mistakes along the way, that's okay. As long as we learn and we improve as we go along through this. And it's also important to recognize that training and coaching are different and distinct, but they're both necessary. Training helps the teams get started, helps them learn the rules of the game. But like with learning any new difficult skill, training doesn't go far enough. Coaching is what helps to cement those practices as habits. And with any good habit, you want that habit to stick. So we've spent a lot of time training our people, investing in not just hiring in from the outside, but training our people internally. And we train people that you wouldn't normally include within an Agile transformation plan. Some of our legal and finance people were some of our first scaled Agilist certified people in our business. And they really appreciated that we included them in the transformation from the beginning. And they became big change agents throughout our business. And this has been hugely powerful. But transformation efforts are tough. So you need to find ways to have fun. When you do big room planning events, turn them into actual events. Bring in games, dress up in costumes, have your leadership team get up and make fools of themselves in front of the people and show them that it's okay to have fun at work. And the changes will happen inside your organization, but they need to happen outside as well. So don't be afraid to invite your customers in, as ugly as the process is, because they'll enjoy this new way of working because it's all about what's important and what's valuable to them. And lastly, celebrate success, always and often. I told you about that first bad day on the beach. The paddle out and surfing is the struggle. No one learns how to surf without facing those unrelenting walls of white water. But those big waves get a lot less scary when you have a foundation of knowledge, skill, and practice. So you need to find the channels. Find those people that are willing to say, I'm not sure, but I'll give it a shot. Time the sets. Focus on what's working and find those bright spots. Be resilient. Form a transformation team that you can trust and that you can lean on in those times of struggle. And paddle with purpose. When your time comes, be ready to go forth with every bit of energy that you have. The elation that comes from catching a wave is indescribable. Surfers actually call it stoke. And The Endless Summer was an iconic surfing film from the 1960s. A filmmaker followed two surfers around the globe from alternating destinations in the northern and southern hemisphere, trying to actually follow summer and make it seem endless. Pursuing an agile transformation, it's like a business enterprise realization of that endless summer, where the agile principles and practices have been truly adopted and put into practice throughout your entire organization. Thank you.